So driveways, sidewalks, patios, things like that, I'm going to go relatively quick on this. It's going to all be the same thing. It'll be common sense stuff. Sidewalks and driveways need to be relatively level. If they are going to have a slope, that slope should be to direct water away from the house. We don't want to be bringing water to the garage or to the house or from either one of these. They should be smooth, flat, even. All right. We use the term trip hazard a lot. Think about if there's an elderly person with a walker. All right. If you think they're going to have trouble traversing that area, we need to call that out. So typically it's going to be like 3/4 of an inch, broken pieces. Those are all areas, and we just make generic statements for trip hazards with them. If we get these slabs, like this one down here, we need to make sure that they're secured. We're going to talk about heights on steps, but look and see if you can see lines where concrete was at one time, so you can see what sort of settlement occurred on that one. This one, caught me off guard. We were walking up to the front of the house, and I stepped on the front edge, and then all of a sudden the whole thing flipped up on me, and it's like, holy cow, this could definitely hurt somebody. So some of these are kind of no-brainers. All right, this was a catch basin, same thing. It was broken on the edges. All you had to do is step on that one spot, and the whole thing just tipped and flipped over like that. It wasn't that it was off-centered or not installed right. There was just no lip on one side of this thing. And, if you take that catch basin and turn it sideways, it would probably turn it sideways, it would probably fall inside there too. The whole reason why they make these things round is so that lid can't fall in there. But if you're missing half the pieces where it would pivot like that, it would actually be pretty easy to come in there. And then even these areas here, just take the picture, let your client be aware of it. If they don't want to fix it, it's their choice. But at least it's not going to end up being your problem. Same thing, uneven pieces like that, those are kind of no-brainers. Uneven steps, our magic number is 3/8 of an inch. That's all we're allowed to be uneven from the different steps. All right. So when I see stuff like this, it's kind of obvious. This step going up to here is different than this step, and it's an epidemic. You're going to see it a lot. Uneven steps are going to cause a lot of tripping, and obviously this area right here, this person tripped over, and they died. No, they didn't. Who am I kidding? This was Joe. This is my old house when we had a raised patio. The guys that installed it left a few blocks loose. When we had a bunch of people over there, they stepped on this area here and noticed that it was loose. And of course, they all have to pose. And poor Joe died in my backyard as well. Dogs in the way, trip hazards. Okay, I get it. That's a little too much. We'll keep moving forward. I would like you to know the difference between a porch, a deck, and a balcony. So porches and decks, they will have a staircase that will take you to the earth. Balconies will not. Porches will have a roof. Decks will not. Balconies may have a roof, but more so it's not going to have a staircase that goes down to the earth. So if it has a roof over it, we're going to call it a porch. If it doesn't have a roof over it, it's a deck. All right. Some people refer to porches as, the main point of entry, and that may be true too. All right. But for definition purposes, porch has a roof on it. All right. So decks have stairs, and porches have roof coverings. Balconies do not have stairs, and they only have one way in or out. All right. I'd also like you to know the difference between a guardrail and a handrail. I'm going to come back to these slides in a little bit. All right. I'm not finding what I want to find right away. Sorry. There we go. So I want you to know the difference between a guardrail and a handrail. All right, a handrail is going to help you go up and down staircases. A guardrail is going to keep you from falling. So these are guardrails. All right. Guardrails have to be a minimum of 36 inches high. They can be more, but they have to be a minimum of 36 inches high. Handrails, I need to have a handrail if I have more than 3 steps. Then I need to have a handrail. So 4 or more steps, I need a handrail. So we start on the ground. We got 1, 2, 3, 4. At this point in time, I would need a handrail, and then we have 5. All right. So even the surface that we're going to land on, that also counts. Every time I have to lift my leg up is what we're counting. So if it's only 3, I don't have to have a handrail. If it's more than 3, then I need to have a handrail. All right. Let's go back to the slide we had earlier. All right. So these are guardrails. In between the guardrail, we shouldn't have openings more than 4 inches. All right. Now be careful with some of these questions on the state exam. They may be asking you, what is the largest opening that you can have in a railing system? All right. So they didn't identify if it's a guardrail or a handrail. They just said it's a railing system. All right. And they didn't say where this was going to be or so forth. So there are areas where you can have a 6-inch opening where that's okay. So if I have a bottom rail on my handrail or whatever that comes down here from my spindles, this triangle in here, that can be 6 inches. All right, a 6-inch sphere. Up here is still 4 inches, but in here it's 6 inches. All right. So if they say what's the largest opening in a guardrail, 4 inches. If they say what is the largest opening between balusters, 4 inches. If they say what is the largest opening in a handrail system that's allowed, 6 inches. All right. And it would be at this location here. They've put these in and out of the codes, so it all depends. And one thing about building codes is just because the codes change doesn't mean that all the homes have to change as well. All right. And there was a time when we weren't allowed to put railings that were like ladders where people could climb up them and install those in a building. But I think that comes and goes. So without knowing when this house was built and knowing exactly what code was adopted during that time, it's kind of hard to say whether or not it should have been or should not have been. All right. Joist hangers and for decks and porches and attaching them to the wall. Anytime we have a floor joist, we have to have a minimum of 1.5 inch support underneath that. All right. So we're talking about this area here. So we really can only use 2x lumber. If we're going to be resting our floor joist on top of that lumber, then we need to have it to be 1.5 inches, which is 2x lumber. And it has to be all the way out to the edge. All right, it can't be it can't be short of being pushed up against the concrete where it comes in there. Most of the time, what people do is they'll use joist hangers on there. But before I go on there, I think this slide is more talking about the ledger board. All right, so we can bolt on the ledger board. There, that is acceptable to do it. I'm not a big fan of using lag bolts on this one, especially on brick buildings. We should have through bolts, washers on both sides of these things. And also our bolts should be in a pattern where they're not straight across like that. They should be one high, one low, one high, one low. And here it says that they should be staggered every 16 to 24 inches. Basically, you're putting one bolt in between each floor joist. So if our floor joist is installed every 24 inches, then your bolts are installed every 24 inches. There's nothing wrong with them being installed every 16 inches. It is acceptable to put them every 24. However, if your floor joists are installed every 16 inches, and most of them are, then your bolts have to be every 16 inches as well. All right. Joist hangers, the bottom of these joist hangers are going to be 1.5 inches thick. Usually they'll protrude out a little bit, so when I look at the underside and the back, I should be able to see the wood. If I don't see the wood up where it's flush here, that tells me that my floor joist isn't sitting all the way in. And I'm talking about this area right in here. So again, I got my bolts. Hopefully they're gonna be through bolts that go all the way through, but they're lined up, all right? And with this, I would definitely make a comment on it. We've had a lot of bad deck and porch collapses here in the Chicagoland area, and I just don't want it to ever happen to me. Usually it's what they call something being zippered or unzipped, the ledger board being unzipped. So when we put these bolts here and they go all the way across like that, what happens is once we compress it, it will crack right there. And the joist hangers, the bottom of those joist hangers will slide right off. It's only a couple nails up top. And they're going to take those floor joists with them. So the bottom of the ledger board, all the floor joists, all the joist hangers, everything's coming down. And obviously if this is more than one story and it all comes down, that creates a big problem. Now typically in Chicago, we don't use ledger boards, all right? They want what we call lookouts, and they want those going into the brick buildings themselves because they're multiple height porches, and they're afraid that the porch is going to pull away from the building. I'll see if I can get a picture of that here in a bit. They do have special nails for joist hangers, and they're designed to go into treated lumber. I think they actually do have screws nowadays made by the manufacturers as well. And there's going to be little labels on these screws, but what we don't want to see is common sense stuff here. No drywall screws, or they just don't have the sheer strength. All right, we need to be using either bolts because they're thicker, or actual double dip galvanized nails. All right, I've seen people use roofing nails on these things too. Again, the roofing nails just don't have the sheer strength to support that. These openings here where the blue arrows are, those are going to be for 16 penny double dip galvanized nails, and those are supposed to be toe nailed, so they go through the floor joist and then into the ledger board as well. All right, every hole on these joist hangers is supposed to be filled. There's not supposed to be any empty spots on here whatsoever. All right, doing so just you're asking for trouble, plain and simple. So this ledger board, we don't have any bolts at all in here. They did shoot a couple of ram shots in there. That's also a ram shot. If you don't know what a ram shot is, it's a powder actuated gun that basically you hit. Some of you hit it in hand, some may have triggers, but just like gunpowder shoots a bullet, this gunpowder will shoot that nail and go straight into the concrete and put it in there. But again, they're not designed to hold this kind of weight. They're not designed for sheer pressure. They're designed, if this is the concrete ground and I put something in there, they're designed to go down this way. They can handle shear this way because there's not going to be a lot of force. But we're talking about the whole weight of the deck and everybody on them. We're talking tons. And these ram shots, they're just not designed for that. All right. This one they use roofing nails, missing nails. I do like underneath here. This is what I was talking about before, where we could see the wood. They're designed to kick out that metal just so you can see behind it. So that is what it's designed for. So this one we saw earlier before, 4-inch spheres here, 30 inches. So we need to have a guardrail anytime there's a fall potential of 30 inches, 30, and that's in the IRC. Stair building guides and other people, they'll tell you that if we're less than 42 inches, if we're less than a 5-foot drop, I think it is, then we could be 36 inches. Bigger drops than that, it should be 42 inches. But that's not in the IRC. So 36 inches is our minimum. But I am a big fan of taller railings, especially with bigger falls. All right, it just makes me more comfortable. All right, so 42 inches. Again, this is not in the IRC, but it depends on our fall potential. 30 inches is the minimum. There's some communities that they've adopted 12 inches. All right, so depending on where you're going to mostly be doing your work, you kind of want to check with that community and see when they require guardrails. The IRC is what I want you to know for test purposes, and that's going to be at 30 inches. Handrails are typically going to be somewhere around 32 inches. You know, here they say 34 to 38 is typical, 31 to 34. Yeah, I've seen 32 inches. So when the balusters go straight down to the stairs like this, then we don't have that 6-inch luxury anymore. That's all going to be 4-inch. All right. Handrails need to be grippable. They should be more than 1.5 inches to grab hold of these things. Typically they want them round in some way, or again at least oval, so they come back in a little bit. I need to have a gap between the handrail and the wall. That's also 1.5 inches. They need to go all the way to the top, past the top of a step, and all the way down to the bottom floor. They should turn back into the walls. And we should be able to slide our hand without getting any slivers or stuff. I hear two things on this one. You know, some people say a 2x4 on end is considered acceptable, and some say it isn't. I think that all depends on who the authority having jurisdiction is. So there's some authorities, there's some communities that say, yeah, it's no problem. Other ones say, no, it must be grippable, it's no good. Landings, we have to have one main landing that is 3 feet by 3 feet minimum. It could be more, but all secondary landings, they don't have to have that 3 foot by 3 foot. So we could take a staircase straight out of them. I personally like having landings, but that's me. But there's nothing in the code books that require it. Staircases are typically going to be 3 feet wide. That is the minimum, 3 feet wide for a staircase. I only have to have one handrail for a staircase, but until I get over 44 inches wide, then I have to have a second handrail on the other side. I still have to start thinking about guardrails as well, and we can use the handrails for fall potential. So if it does go up really high, we are going to have handrails on both sides. But I do have to have a 3 foot width. You know, my handrails can protrude into the 3 foot width, but the balusters cannot. All right. Entry lights from the outside, I should have some method that I could switch it and turn a light on from the inside. I need to have an outlet that's nearby the door, and I have to have some sort of, whether it's a side light, peephole, window through a door, some way that I could see outside. So I have to light it, outlet, and be able to see the bad guys on the other side of the door. All right. Different terms on staircases. I'm kind of expecting you to know the difference between a riser and a tread. I also want you to know the difference between the rise and the run, and then the stringer. All right. So the diagonal portion that supports the steps, that's going to be our stringer. All right. Typically, we're going to have 3 of those, but it all depends on the width of the staircase. The wider it is, the more stringers you're going to have underneath there. The riser is this piece of wood that goes underneath the tread there, and that stops my toes. Not all staircases or decks are required to have a riser. I'm a big fan of risers, and yeah, but you're going to find a lot of decks they just don't do it. Treads, all right, that's what we stand on or step on. I do want you to know our minimum numbers when it comes to it. So the maximum riser height, we're going to go with 7 3/4 inches. I like to use 8 inches because I like simple numbers, and it just makes it easy for me to remember. But if you're an exact person, the number you want to remember is 7 3/4 inches. Same thing with the tread depth. I like to remember 10 because I like simple numbers, but the real number is 9 3/4. All right, 9 3/4 inches. No less than 36 inch wide The nosing, and that's the part that sticks out over the riser, that can be no more than 1 inch. All right, so typical nosing is about 1 inch, 3/4 of an inch to 1. The slope of a staircase should be no greater than 1 48 slope. Basically what they're saying is my stairs, both left and right, need to be equal, and then tilting forward and back need to be equal. Each step as I go up, so the distance between here and down below it, that has to be the same as the rest of these steps as I work my way all the way up the staircase. I am allowed a little bit of leniency. This is our magic number, 3/8 of an inch. You may see that on a test, so I would like you to remember that one as well. All right. The 1 48, I'm not too concerned about that. They should be flat. All right. If you can notice anything where something's sloping and leaning, or it's out of level, then we should be calling it out. I consider those trip hazards. All right. Cantilevered balconies means we don't have any support, so the floor joists are going to run into the building. And a couple of rules on that. First of all, cantilevered balconies, very difficult to flash, very problematic with water entry coming into the building. On the underside, especially if I got a header window door, I would be so aggressive underneath here, using that flashlight trick, getting the moisture meter out, getting the thermal imager out, look to see for signs of past repairs. These are just so prone to water damage. Same thing on the inside. If there's carpeting up in here, I would do what I can. A, put the moisture meter on it. B, see if I could lift it up a little bit just to see if there's been any water damage to the tack strip or the wood that's beneath it. I get it. It's not required that we have to do that sort of stuff. But again, these are the complaints. These are going to be expensive if your client moves in to the house and then all of a sudden, they're getting water coming into the home and they didn't even get a heads up on it that there's a possibility that this can happen. All right. So being aggressive, looking for any signs on these areas, just because they're so prone to leakage, I can't push that enough. All right. So common sense stuff, make sure our flooring and railings are secured. Our joists, make sure they're not rotted. Look for the flashing. We're going to see it underneath the flooring material. Should go behind the siding or under the door and come out over the floor joists and extend out a few inches too. And, we don't want to take a chance for anything coming back in. All right. This is actually a porch, and this is called a fire cut, and this is a typical Chicago porch that comes in here. But beforehand, I want to go back to the balconies, okay, and talk about the rules. So, whatever comes out this far, we need twice as much to go in. So if this is a 4-foot cantilever, I need 8 feet going back to the inside, tied to those floor joists there. All right. Not always is the math going to work. So it's not like we could build these big long cantilevers without putting some sort of support on the outside. Same thing with the doors. We still have to have an outlet out there, and we still have to have a light out there, just as if it was a porch or balcony. So here we have a typical post and beam rear porch that we find in the city of Chicago, 3 flats. We see them dime a dozen, right? And this cut down in here on this lumber, this is actually called a fire cut, all right? And what they're trying to do is if this structure, this is what supports everything, if that fails and it's, how do I put this? If it's in like this and it's straight up and down and it fails, it's going to pivot on that top part. And when it pivots, it's going to push that upper wall out. So and then it's going to start releasing the floor joist from above. And that's when you're going to have the pancake effect that's going to be happening. All right. It's kind of what happened we had a collapse in, oh gosh, I forgot what year it was. It was a long time ago. And it was near the Lincoln Park area. It was a bunch of college kids from DePaul. They were having a big party. It was definitely overweight. They didn't have lookouts. And these lookouts, these beams right here, they actually go into the concrete brick structure of the house. So that whole post sets in there a good 6 inches. All right. This porch wasn't built this way. The porch that collapsed was built with ledger bolts or a ledger board, and then they put bolts in there. Now you put 100 kids on there, or 150 teenagers on there, or 20-year-olds, and then they're dancing and swinging and rocking this whole thing. They pulled that ledger board off. Then they didn't have fire cuts in there, so the ledger board collapsed, tilted out the posts on the outside walls, and that caused the other ones to collapse. And so now you got kids on the first floor, and then the second floor kids all collapsed on them, and God forbid, I think they lost like 13 souls that day. It was a horrible thing. So this fire cut, this is designed to prevent that. All right. So now if it's on an angle, and I don't know if I can get my hand on an angle, but if it's like this, and this piece comes out, now it's not going to pivot. It's actually going to slide right out without pushing that wall over. We want to, anytime we have a brick building, our floor joists, our beams, everything needs to be done with fire cuts on the end. They have to have that angle. So I would like you to recognize that. Attic stairs and pull down stairs and ladders. I do want you to know the difference between a stair and a ladder. All right. We can have a permanently installed ladder that does not have to conform to our stair building rules. So our stair building rules: 3 feet wide, handrails top to bottom, turn back in 9 3/4, 7 3/4 for our height and run. Those are our minimums. 7-11 is what our norm is. That's what we want to enjoy, and that's what's comfortable working. Those are our staircase rules. All right. For ladders, they don't have to conform to that. So we can have steep staircases going up to the attic. We can have steep staircases with bad railings, going down to the basement. All right. Permanently installed ladders are allowed, but they must go to unfinished areas. So as soon as I start finishing that attic or finishing that basement, or if I put a sofa and TV and I'm inviting people to go down there and stay down there, now I have to have a staircase. I can't have a ladder going to those locations. All right. And you're going to see that a lot. When the house was built and they built it with an unfinished attic and an unfinished basement, they put ladders going up and down. They never expected people to use those areas. Then people want to expand their homes. Those were easy ways to do it, and they turned those into living spaces, but never did anything with the ladders. All right. Now, your client may not care. All right. That's just the way all the houses were done back in the day, and usually they're going to find them all in the same neighborhood as well. But when they go to sell the house, there's another home inspector that might say, hey, you don't have a conforming staircase here, and you should have one. So instead of letting that be the bad guy, I'm hoping you're going to start calling these things out. And that way, if the client wants to accept it, it's the client's responsibility, not mine. All right? So I'm a little leery when it comes to staircases and defective ladders. They're weak. They're not strong material that comes up there. And, for me, I'll pull these things down, especially the pull-down staircases or pull-down ladders. And then I'm going to put my ladder on top of them. And I'll use my ladder to go up and down on these items. So be careful. Don't do anything dumb. Don't get hurt. All right? So we will find where we're going to have nails and bolts that have to be installed. And the good news is they put signs: drive nail through hole in metal bracket, And I give them credit. It's something that's so plain and simple, even I can understand it. Yet the rule wasn't followed. And we should take a picture of these things and make sure they're installed safely. All right. And again, be aggressive. All right. Pull down stairs in garages also. They need to be, have a drywall put on top of them. They have to be airtight sealed. That comes in there. And then you're going to find on these, very rarely do they have decent insulation on them. All right. So there's a whole bunch of stuff that's missing.